Hello and welcome to week two, lesson two of our TKE member education series. Hopefully, it's a welcome back to most of you who have been a part of one, if not all three, of the videos that we have released so far. If this is your first time coming in, this topic interested you specifically, welcome, and hopefully you take some time to go back and check out some of the other things we've offered, and you stay tuned in and stay with us moving forward. Today, it's up there on the screen. We're going to talk about personal finances, and that's a topic I think that's relevant for all of us, whether you are a freshman in college or whether you are retired or anywhere in between. And hopefully what this workshop does is gives you some tips and some tricks and some advice that are going to lead to some long-term financial success. What I want to talk about today is a few things. Most importantly, your financial well-being in general, making sure that you have enough money to pay for the things that you need, to pay for the things that you want in a lot of cases, and you have enough money that when it comes time to start thinking about retirement 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the line, that you're in a good position to do so. We are going to talk a little bit about financial management throughout college, because that's a position I know a lot of you watching right now are in. And it's tough. I recognize that. I was in the same position a lot of you were, where the bank account got down to single digits a few times throughout my 4 years at Franklin College. But thinking about some different ways that we can alleviate some of those pressures and stresses. And then we're just going to talk through some of the other steps of sound financial practices of budgeting and saving, what it looks like when you want to start investing your money, and what it is that you're spending your money on. Most important thing that I want to keep in mind is I want to try and keep this as realistic as possible. You could go anywhere on the internet and search, financial management or financial tips for college students that are going to tell you to, don't spend any extra money on food, and don't spend any extra money on alcohol, and don't spend any money on concert tickets, or don't buy new shoes. And, that is valid in some regard, but also, we all have things that we want to spend money on. We all have things that we enjoy that make us happy. And for those that adhere to those strict principles where they're not spending any extra money on some of those things I just talked about, that's extremely admirable. But I also don't want to try and tell you to live your life in a way that's not going to make you happy and not going to make you feel fulfilled. And at the end of the day, if you can start to build habits now that are going to stick with you for 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, that's the most important thing. It's not one or two decisions at a given point in time that are going to give you a little more money this month. It's what can I do to set myself up for sustainable financial success. We're going to start things a little differently, actually. We're going to start with a guest speaker. So this is Bryan Keller. Bryan is a graduate of Drexel University Alpha Tau chapter. He has spent his career, the better part of the last 15 years, as a financial manager. He's currently in wealth management as a partner with an investment firm down in Florida. That doesn't mean, though, that he only invests money in stocks for the top 1% of the 1%. Bryan deals with people all over the financial spectrum at all levels of income, and he certainly has much more knowledge and a much better grasp on the financial situation of what we're in today with the COVID-19 outbreak, and what you can do to be successful moving forward than I do. And so I want to start with him, and I want to give him some time, and I want to use his comments to frame the little bit of the rest of the conversation we have on the back end. But again, hopefully you watch this, take in this interview, and make some notes and think about ways that you can apply his words to your life. Hello, Frater Bryan. How are things down there in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida for you?
We're doing well, thank you. Things are good. We're quarantined just like everybody else, getting through it, and looking forward to getting to the other side of it. So just thinking about everybody else out there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously hope you and the family are safe and healthy and enjoying the time that you get to spend with your little ones. Sure they're getting along swimmingly in these uncertain times.
Yeah, I have a 2.5-year-old and 5-month-old daughter, and 12-year-old Weimaraner. So it's a lot of quality family time together. So we're making the best of it, just like everybody.
Winston probably just wants to be left alone, I'm assuming.
He, at this stage in his life, I think he's over it more than the rest of the family is.
Well, poor dog.
Yeah.
Well, I want to get into some questions here. Obviously, we brought you in because you have a lot of experience in the financial sector and a strong background. If you would, to kick off, just describe a little bit about what your TEAC experience looked like, what your college experience looked like, and then from a professional standpoint, what is it that you do, and how have you gotten to that point in your career?
Yeah, sure. So I attended Drexel University in the great city of Philadelphia. I know you're a big Eagles fan there, Al. Um, and joined the Alpha Tau chapter there I was initiated January of 2003, and had just a phenomenal experience there, both at a chapter level, and then meeting a whole bunch of folks across Teak Nation, attending RLCs and Conclave and the Leadership Academy. Um, and, I held, Preakness and Chryso and Hegemon, was on the Collegiate Advisory Committee. So got to work with some of uh, the Home Office and also the Grand Council. And just a phenomenal experience. And I think what that really helped me do is I think find some of my entrepreneurial passions to be a self-starter and to think like an owner, and to take things like accountability and responsibility really seriously, and know what that means. And that's now propelled me, and always having an interest in finance and in the investment world. I think if you would ask me in college and even before college, what do you want to do, when you grow up as a profession, I'd probably give you the answer to exactly what I'm doing today. And so I've just always pretty been direct in that interest. And and what I do today is my partners and I launched an investment firm. We're a registered investment advisor, an RIA, and we launched in May of 2018. And we serve typically high net worth families, both in terms of investment management, financial counseling. We have CPAs and lawyers on staff that will do tax compliance and estate planning as well. So it's really a holistic service offering to those clients.
Awesome. I know, I have a target dates circled on my calendar for when I'm eligible to be advised by your firm as a high net worth client, but still a year and a half away. That's the goal. So
Anytime we can accelerate that for you,
I'll
Al.
give, when we talk about, I want to focus first on our current circumstances of the quarantine, and people are being laid off and losing jobs and being furloughed, and I think money is tight for a lot of people all over the country right now. What are some small changes that you could advise people out there to make, whether it's a college student or a 20-year professional, some small changes that they can make that will make a big impact on their financial standing and their money habits?
Yeah, so from a big picture, you're absolutely right. This and in the industry, and I think it's pretty well known that this is what we're going through right now is really a black swan event. It's not something that typically happens in the markets. It's not something that you can kind of rely on year after year. But in many ways, it kind of came out of nowhere. And because of that, and due to that, it's really caught a lot of people offside. So just this morning we saw another over 6 million in jobless claims, and we're gonna hit some pretty bad standing in terms of where we are from an economic standpoint. You saw the markets go down 30% in the month of March, and a lot of people are losing their jobs, losing their income, and to make matters worse, because it all happened in a short period of time, it's difficult for people to go and then get those resources that are available, whether it's unemployment insurance or different facilities that our government is putting out there to help save small businesses. So the good news is that those facilities are being put out there. By my count this morning, there's over $8.5 trillion of economic aid and stimulus package that's being put forth in the economy. and I think that number is going to go higher. We're going to hit 50% of GDP once all that's said and done over the next couple of months. So that's the good news. The bad news is that because we're such a bottleneck, it's difficult to get it right. The pipe isn't big enough for the person who was a bartender or who worked in the travel and leisure and entertainment business to now get some of those benefits that were being put out there. But to answer your, to the specifics of your question, I think what I would encourage people to do right now is make sure that you know what resources are being made available to you. What can you access in order to help provide some relief on this situation? So if you're eligible to collect on insurance, make sure that you're putting the time and effort in to do that, because it's there and it's available for you, and it'll help you get through this period. If you happen to run a small business, make sure that you're reading up on the right government websites, whether that's the Treasury Department or the SBA, and knowing what's available to you, because more often than not, people are going to be they're going to be able to access these programs. And I would hate for someone to say, I just lost my job, that sucks, I guess I'm going to have to just go find a new one. Well, yes, that is something you need to do, but there are things that will help tide you over. And I would say, a couple other things too. And when you have situations like this, these situations, in addition to creating new problems, they make old problems that you used to have that much worse. And I think the wrong way to approach it is to ignore them. And if you had credit card debt or student loan or a car payment that was already kind of tight, I would encourage people to be proactive, to try to work with the lender, whether it's a credit card company. It's better to be proactive, to call them, explain your situation, and let them know or ask them to work with you to help you through the situation, than to ignore it. Because if you ignore it, then they're going to come back at you acting like you're trying to hide from it. Whereas if you're proactive and you're calling them and saying, hey, I have $1,000 to pay off my credit card and I'm supposed to have it paid off in a month, can you work with me so that I can do it over the next 3 months? Given everything going on, more likely than not, whether that's rent, a mortgage, credit cards, student loans, they will work with you. And if they don't, then I think you kind of go to plan B. But I would encourage everyone, be proactive and don't try to ignore it and pretend it's going to go away. But just head it straight on, and you're going to sleep better at night. Also, knowing that you've dealt with the situation, or at least tried to, rather than have the fear and anxiety of it coming back to you in a manner you can't control it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the proactive piece is extremely important, and I know a lot of even DirecTV and AT&T and some of those providers, they're giving people relief and not shutting services down. But like you said, you need to make the phone call. You need to take the time and actually plan for that, rather than just hoping that things work out. So very important piece there. Shifting to just more in general, when we're thinking about financial management in college. College is a tough financial time. I know for many students, they're in a period in life when maybe mom and dad aren't supporting them like they used to be, but they don't really have time and experience and skills to go find a full-time job. And so they're working odd jobs here and there, or working over the summer and trying to save for the school year. What are some financial tips you might give to a college student, whether, again, they're new in college or they've been in college for a few years, to help them stretch the dollars they have and manage the money that they have coming in, so they don't feel as stressed and they don't feel like their situation is quite as tight?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to know who you owe money to at all times. And whether that's just, as you said before, the cell phone bill, if that's something that individual is responsible to, know that that's a monthly expense, and have some sort of budget to say, every month I know that there's $200 going out the door before I get out of bed. And then you have to add in, the food, the gas, and all that other stuff to do that. So just kind of knowing what that number is so important, because if you don't know, the size of, I don't want to call it a problem, because it's not a problem, but just the size of the responsibility, and you don't know what you're dealing with, it makes it that much more difficult to tackle. In addition to that, I've always been a fan of when I have my bank account, I'll typically have two bank accounts, and I'll have one account where those reoccurring payments or those debt payments, those are always coming out of that account. And I know I need to put $200 in every month because there's $200 going out. That second account is, you call it play money, you call it whatever, but I don't have anything tied to it. I have no responsibilities tied to it. So if I'm bringing in $300 a month, I put 200 into the account where I know there's 200 going out by the end of the month, and I put $100 that I can go do whatever I want with. And I don't need to really have a tight budget around it. And if I spend it all day one of the month, that's fine. I still have my responsibilities met. So I like that approach. Most banks will work with college students so that you're not paying any fees related to your checking accounts. So make sure that you do that. You have the right account set up. Some banks won't proactively let you know that. So make sure you're not, paying needless added fees. But by setting it up that way, you're setting yourselves up with a structure to make sure that you're meeting your responsibilities, you're not falling behind, and you're kind of cordoning things off so that if you do go, out to eat with your buddies and you're pulling $20 out from the ATM, there's only one card that you're using that for, and you're not pulling it out of the account that you were supposed to pay your cell phone bill with by mistake.
Yeah, that's good. I think that just goes into having a plan and managing that plan and sticking to it accordingly. And I think, I think you'd agree that's important from day one when you go into college. It's not something where you want to fail and miss a bunch of payments before you make that change. These are things that you should be thinking about as you get into school and start to figure out what that 4 years of life looks like.
Yeah, and I think the worst part of all of that is the anxiety that it creates, right? There's already so much pressure, whether that's juggling school and work, fraternity responsibilities. In addition to that, you don't want money responsibilities or falling behind to then add a fourth or fifth layer to stresses that you're already creating. So as much as you can de-stress that from the financial standpoint, it allows you to not be distracted from what you're there for, to get an education, to really dive deep and get the most out of your fraternity experience. Because when you start falling behind the eight ball as it relates to financial responsibilities, creditors, especially if you're not being proactive with them, they don't care about excuses. They're just getting their money back, and they know how to find you. So one of the worst things you can do there is just fall behind from financial responsibility, and just doing some planning up front goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking post-college, and I'm thinking immediately post-college, where you may have just landed your first job. It's not the highest paying job in the world. You're still, again, you're trying to build that budget. Now you have an apartment, you might have a new car payment, other things going on that you didn't have when you were in school, but you do have some more income coming in. What tips, what advice do you give to people in that situation that have a little extra money to maybe play with or throw around, but not a ton? What tips would you give them that can set them up for some long-term success and long-term sustainability?
Yeah, so I carry forward my original suggestion about having two different accounts set up that have a purpose for different reasons. So post college, you're going to have your rent payment, your car payment. You're going to have other responsibilities that you're doing, and then you're going to have a little bit more for fun and entertainment and going out and all of that stuff too. So by coordinating those things off, you're making sure that you're you're able to do everything you need to do. But another thing that's added too is you start to get to the point where you're thinking about saving more seriously. A lot of companies offer corporate sponsored 401k plans, and most, if not all of them, will provide some sort of match there. And if I like to, not to oversimplify it, but let's say you come out of school, you're making 50 grand a year, you should set an annual savings rate based on how much you're making. I like the 20% number. So if you're making 50 grand a year, your goal, your aim, just as a good practice to get into and habit to get into, should be to save about 20% of that. A lot of that can be done through your 401k. And if your company's matching that, that's kind of a free couple percentage points to get there. And then I would start putting money away too. And the nice thing about the paycheck and direct deposit is when you do get paid, you can cordon off how much goes into which of these accounts that you've set up. So if you know that every month, now that you're making more money, it's not $200 going out, but now $2,000 a month going out because you have more responsibilities. Well, make sure that you're getting $2,000 a month directed right into that one account, and then everything else can flow into the other account. But also make sure that you're taking care of whether it's 401k, your IRA contributions, and Al, as the first 5 and 10 years after college go by super, super quick. And next thing, if you do it right, and you kind of forget that it's there, and you invest it, in the right manner, you're going to start saving up a really nice nest egg. And just having that first head start, right out of college when you're in your early 20s and mid 20s, that makes a world of a difference in terms of, where you set yourself up to be from a retirement standpoint, just a couple decades down the road. So those are good things. And, but I encourage, that's a great time in life. Everyone focuses on college, and college is a lot of fun, but I would almost argue that those years right after school are a blast. And that's when your friends start to get married, and kids start, coming not too shortly after that, as you and I know. Make sure that you're enjoying that time too, and spending that money in a way where you're seeing the rewards that you're reaping from building all those social connections you made during your time at the fraternity as well.
Yeah, can confirm the first 5 to 10 years after college go by extremely quickly. When you talk about saving, investing, I know for me at least, and I think for a lot of other people, investing can look pretty intimidating. And you might have money going into a 401k, you might have money going into a savings account at your bank, but at what point do you recommend starting to invest beyond that? And what would you say to someone to get them over that initial intimidation of starting to dip into that pool as well?
Yeah, it is really intimidating. And I think investors at a very retail level, anybody can download the Robinhood app to their phone. You can trade for free. In many ways, that's a good thing, because it's more accessible to everybody. In many ways, that's a bad thing, because we as humans tend to make decisions based on our emotions. And when you involve your emotions into investing, folks tend to make poor decisions. And so one of the worst things that you can do, especially if you don't really read up and you're not a professional in the industry, is to get in there and make too many decisions. We're very fortunate, being in the country we are, and having the capitalist society that we do, and just rule of law and everything, that we have the strongest markets, U.S. markets out there. We have the best companies out there. So to oversimplify it and just buy the broad market through an index ETF or mutual fund, that you could do a lot worse. And so I recommend that's where folks look to start first, especially young. In a weird way, all this volatility we've been seeing in the market is a godsend to folks like you and I, and people today just getting started, because it's brought this market down quick 15-20%, And, the long-term growth is still going to be incredible for us to participate in. So, just buying the SPY ETF for a Vanguard index fund, especially here, I think you're going to be in pretty good shape, for those that have a long-term time frame, and then continuously adding to that. So setting up a program where you're making a contribution to that month after month after month, you'd be surprised how quickly that grows over time. And as you get a raise, just make, if you're just making $50 a month contribution, that's $600 a year. And if you get a raise, you're saying, well, maybe I can make $55 a month or $60 a month. And just being really prudent with that it doesn't sound like a lot, and when you think about the short term, but after 5 years, after 10 years, and certainly after a couple of decades, it really adds up to the tunes of tens of thousands of dollars. So, so that's the smartest thing. But there is, it's not just intimidating. There's a lot of opportunity for people to not even just make bad decisions, but to be taken advantage of. And so whether you're looking at the market or things to invest in, the most important thing you can do is make sure that you're not paying a lot of fees and expenses. So you don't need to buy, a mutual fund with a high expense ratio. You don't need to chase performance and look at a stock that has gone up 30% over the past 3 months and put all your money into that, because chances are, you're getting in, right before things, take a turn. So, it's about being methodical. It's about not putting all your eggs in one basket, and it's about, not paying a ton of fees, and doing it in a just a thoughtful manner.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's extremely helpful. Is there, I think another thing that you think about, or that people think about who aren't heavily invested and don't have a ton of money, is, I don't have $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 to throw into the market right now. Is there a dollar amount that you might suggest that is a threshold to start with, or is it really just whatever you have that's expendable that you want to put toward the future, that's fine?
No, I don't think there's any dollar amount that's too small, because it's not about the dollar amount, it's about the habit that you're building. So by making that commitment, and whether it's you and your spouse or however you decide to do it, or if it's just you personally as a single person, making that commitment and starting that behavior is the most important part of it. And even if it's just to start with $50, I'm starting with a clean slate today, but I'm making today's monthly contribution of $50. I'm putting that into the account. And I don't know off the top of my head, but I know that there are platforms out there that will allow you to start there and to buy one share of an ETF, or one share of a mutual fund, or even if there's just a really good US blue chip stock that you like a Disney or a Microsoft or an Amazon. I'm not recommending those. I'm just saying those as examples, although they wouldn't be bad. That it's just about building that habit and behavior. And before you know it, you will have that $10, $25, $50,000 because you've built that habit and behavior, and you can start maybe doing different things with that. Maybe start diversifying that a little bit, or talk to someone who's knowledgeable in the field that can help, provide some different ideas on how to go about that.
Excellent. Yeah, I appreciate that advice for me personally, but also as it relates to, I think, a lot of our members who are in that transition stage in life right now. One other thing you talked about a little earlier that I want to make sure we touch on is debt. And that's something that I know financial advisors have all different policies on and feelings on. A lot of times, as we know, taking on debt is necessary. It's necessary to buy a house or a car. But there's also, I think, unnecessary debt with extreme credit card bills and other things. What's your policy on taking on debt? Specifically for student loans, what are your thoughts on getting those paid off, but also just in general, taking on debt and the best way to make sure you're not getting in over your head and you're able to stay on top of it?
Yeah. So with debt, and kind of goes back to what I was talking about in terms of dividing, when you have an income stream come in, and you have one account that's dedicated to your recurring payments. What debt does is it just gives you less discretionary spending, because you're paying that down over time. And it's a responsibility that, again, no debtor is ever going to issue you debt and then forgot that they issued it to you. They are going to hunt you down. Um, so you just have to be really smart and thoughtful anytime, whether it's just swiping the credit card at the bar, or the car purchase or the home purchase. You have to be really confident in that decision. The good news is that interest rates are really low. So with the exception of credit cards, that your service on that debt, the cost of that debt, is going to be low by historical standards. But even with credit cards, even if it's still 10, 12, 15% interest, that's pretty steep. And if you have a $5,000 credit card balance out there, you're gonna pay $750 a year just to carry that balance. And so I think the most important thing, again, to reiterate what I said earlier, is just know where you sit with all of that. So sit down one Sunday morning when you have nothing else going on, and pull all of your statements and make sure that you know what's out there, whether it's student loans, credit card, mortgage, car payments, even healthcare stuff. Just put it all out there, and the problem starts and gets worse when you pretend it doesn't exist or when you ignore it. So the first thing you need to do is acknowledge it. And there's a couple of good services out there. I think Credit Karma, if I have that website right, is a good one that you can register for, and they look at your FICO score and your credit rating, and they'll kind of help you track that. And I think it's free. So I recommend people going to that website, making sure it's accurate. If it's not, that's definitely something you want to fight. But that gets it all in front of you. And there's other good services like Mint or Quicken that will help you kind of get all of those things in order, so that you can at least acknowledge the problem and start to tackle it. And again, be proactive with it. Put a payment plan in place. If you don't have credit cards, you should be paying them off every month. If you do have a credit card debt out there, maybe look at transferring that balance to a new lower interest balance, and then put a plan that over 6 months I'm going to pay that down and pay that off. And because the best thing that you can do is to not have any credit card debt out there. But like anything else, it's just kind of knowing what the landscape is, know what the problem is, and know where the issues might be, and at least you can lower your anxiety level about what's on your plate.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that probably applies to all of us in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
That's the last question I had for you. Before I let you go, is there anything else, any final tips, any final advice you wanna throw out there as it relates to financial management in general?
No, I think going back to the investment question. I mean, that's where I spend all of my time professionally, and just for a personal passion of mine. You did say, and I think you're accurate, most folks are really intimidated by that. But I encourage everyone to just dive in head first, and even if if you have $1,000 that if you lost it all, it wouldn't change your lifestyle. I encourage everyone to at least rip the Band-Aid off, open an account, and just buy your first stock or your first ETF, just to get that process done with. Because once you do that and you watch it for a while, and you get to see kind of how things work, but more importantly, you get to see how you react to it, right? So if you buy an ETF and the market, which has been very volatile, happens to go down big one day, how do you feel about that? Does that freak you out? Does that make you want to sell it? What that does is that tells you a lot about your risk tolerance. And then you can learn to invest accordingly. If that excites you and you want to buy more, then that tells you something. So I would encourage people to go out and be thoughtful, be prudent. You don't need to go out and buy penny stocks to get rich. You just need to put a plan together, and the best thing you can do is just rip that Band-Aid off. Go into it, start doing it, and you'll learn pretty quickly that it's fascinating, it's interesting. There's a lot of great companies out there. There's a lot of great resources, learning resources out there, and you just need to get kind of started a little bit, and you'll quickly kind of learn and get comfortable with how the process works, and you'll get started on the path of success that'll really pay off over the next couple decades.
Yeah, fantastic. I hope that is something that applies again to everyone, whether we're talking to a freshman in college right now who isn't even on their radar about retiring and investing, or somebody who's 50 or 60 years old and is getting to that point. I think it's very valid no matter what stage you are in life.
That's right.
Appreciate the conversation, Brian. Always a pleasure getting to chat with you. So thank you. And again, the opportunity to bring folks like Brian in and talk to them and be able to pick their brains on some of these different topics we're covering throughout this month. It's hopefully very, very beneficial, and everyone's taken a lot away. So thank you again, Brian. I'll let you go, and we'll talk again soon, my friend.
Thanks, Al. I enjoyed it. Go Eagles.
Okay. All right. That's enough. And thank you again to Brian for his wise words that, again, I think all of us can use in some form or fashion, no matter where you are in life and no matter how much money you have or how much money you don't have. At the end of the day, it's about knowing where your money's coming from, where it's going, and how you're managing everything in between, how you're managing every part of that process from the time the money hits your bank account until the time that it goes out. And I'll share a little more at the very end about some of the different tools that he talked about that'll help you manage your money a little better, and especially as it relates to the investment stuff that he shared. I want to focus now, again, as I talked about at the beginning, at finances while you are in college and what that means to you as someone who maybe doesn't have a steady income stream right now and has a lot of money going out and has student loans to worry about moving forward. Those first 2 points I already shared. I'm not going to sit here and tell you don't go to Taco Bell, don't order Domino's, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you to not spend a dime on alcohol as long as you are of age and responsible with it. That's not realistic for a lot of college students. It wasn't realistic for me when I was in college. The important thing is having a threshold and staying principled as to how much money you're spending on those things. Where if you have a $20 a week budget for food and drink, and you exceed that budget on Wednesday, and one of your buddies is trying to get you to go out on Friday or order pizza on Saturday night, that you're able to tell them no, and you're able to articulate why, and able to share that, you are trying to put yourself in position to not be stressed about money and to be happy and successful in the long term. And that by going out and dropping $20, $40, $150 at the bar, you're going to put yourself in a hole that's going to be really hard to dig out of. Being able to have those conversations with the people around you, with the people that you care about and that care about you, is vital when it comes to maintaining that financial flexibility while you are in college. I put living arrangements up there because college tuition is one beast, right? And it's probably not something that you can get around unless you have a scholarship, which fortunately, a lot of you do, and I congratulate you on that. But when it comes to some of those other big expenses, living arrangements, food, a meal plan, are you buying used textbooks? Are you buying digital versions of textbooks? Or are you going brand new for everything? Think about what expenses you have direct control over as a college student. Maybe you can add another roommate to fill up another bedroom in a house you're living in, or you're able to rent an apartment and live off campus for less money than it would cost you to live in a dorm. Not everyone has that flexibility on college campuses, but if you do, congratulations. Maybe living at home for a semester or for a year and saving money that way is the best solution for you. And if you don't live in a teak house and you don't have that opportunity, then I think there are a lot of other really good ways to take advantage of your living arrangements, to be able to save a little bit and be able to put a little money away that you might have to spend if you were to, again, live in the nicest dorm on campus. And talked about, meal plans, things like textbooks, some of those other expenses on campus. I would really encourage you, if you are in a position as a college student where you're struggling with money, sit down and just think about that stuff. Spend a half hour jotting some thoughts down about where across the board you might be able to save even $25, $50 a month. And that can pay off huge when it comes to you not stressing and not worrying about every single dollar that is in your bank account and going out of your bank account. I'd really encourage you to try and find a way to bring in some income while you're in college, whether that's off campus. A lot of college towns have restaurants and establishments that offer jobs specifically for college students that are 12, 14, 16 hours a week that aren't going to kill you. It's not going to kill you to go work from 10 to 6 on a Saturday and Sunday, right? You're not missing the nights. You're not missing the time you have with your friends. And even at 16 hours a week at $8 an hour, that's going to add up to the point where hopefully you have a little more money that you can spend on things that you want. And if you have a cell phone bill, if you have a car payment, if you have insurance payment, make sure those things are taken care of first, obviously. But finding income, and that doesn't mean just going out and finding a full-time job while you're a college student. You have a million different things going on, and I certainly would not expect that to be feasible, but finding a way to bring in some money is going to be very, very important. A lot of campuses have work-study programs where you can go and get paid $8 an hour for 6 hours a week to sit at the front desk of your library and check out books and laptops to other students, or you can go review essays or tutor students in math or Spanish if you're a good student yourself, and get paid for those things. Explore those options, check in on those opportunities, and make sure that you are exhausting every option when it comes to, again, your financial well-being. I want to talk quickly about financial obligations to TEAC. That's another thing that going back to what Brian said, should be viewed as an expense, right? I hope that you don't view that as something that's secondary or tertiary. Those dollars allow us as an international organization to continue to function, to continue to invest staff resources in your chapters and colonies, to continue to put on our programs, RLCs, Leadership Academy, Conclave. It's a part of life. It's a part of being a TEAC in college that every single person has dealt with. And I just hope that you are including that in your personal budgeting and making sure that those obligations are met the same way that your car payment or your cell phone payment or your tuition payments are being met. And then lastly, student loans. I'm not going to get into a ton here because I know some people are going to pay $100 a month on student loans when they graduate. Some people are going to pay $600 a month. At the end of the day, I think, again, what Brian said sums it up the best, which is don't ignore them. Don't act like they're not there. The people who loaned you that money, that are meant to collect that money, they're going to remember. So the worst thing you can do when it comes to student loans is put it on the back burner and act like it doesn't exist and hope your problems go away. Start building a plan now as to what you're going to do to pay those off, and stick to that plan so that even if the first 5 or 10 years out of college are tight, you're in a position as you get older and start a family and maybe need to start making those big purchases that student loans aren't a huge burden. Quickly, the thing I want to talk about on your first job is just don't hold out for the perfect opportunity if it means delaying your time making money, getting a steady paycheck, building your bank account up. As a 22, 23-year-old, you might have an opportunity to go make 6 figures right out of college. That's great. I hope that that's the case for you. But if not, there's no shame in going and making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year for a few years while you get your feet wet, you build experience in the field that you want to work in, and you're able to, again, have that money to afford an apartment or afford a new car. Those expenses aren't going to go anywhere. Those are probably coming regardless. So all you're doing by delaying and prolonging your ability to take a full-time, full-paying job is your ability to be able to afford those things. So just keep that in mind. I just wanted to touch on that quickly because I think a lot of people fall under the illusion that the perfect opportunity is going to be there when they graduate, and it might not be, and that's okay. Get that first job, start building it up, start building up your financial well-being, and things are going to get easier from there. Talking about credit. So this is something that I talked to Brian about. As you know, just understand what it means when you put money on a credit card or when you apply for a loan. The point there, it is owning something that you can't afford right now. It is a privilege. It is not a right. I'm in my house right now. I certainly have not paid this house off. It is a privilege for me to be able to live in this house without having paid for it in full. But I also know that a significant part of mine and my family's well-being is my ability to be able to pay my mortgage payment and make sure that I'm meeting my financial obligations. I don't know how credit scores work. I don't know what goes into them and how they're calculated. But I do know that if you start off with a poor credit score, if you open up a bunch of credit cards that you don't pay off, or if you miss 6 of your first 10 payments on your car or on your house, that credit score is going to tank, and it's really going to affect your ability to be able to afford things in the future. It's kind of a catch-22 where you need a good credit score to get credit to build your credit score. But there are small ways, like owning low limit credit cards and paying them off, or like getting small loans here and there, that you can build that credit up to where when it comes time to build that family home, you have the ability to get a good interest rate and get the money you need to do so. I put that Credit Karma page up. If you go to Credit Karma, how it works, it talks a lot about credit scores, how you can check it, what it means, what it does for you. I'm not going to sum all that up right now, but hopefully you go check that out and you start to understand exactly what your credit score is going to mean for your long-term financial health. And then the last thing, and really when it comes to financial management, I think this is the most important thing, is living within your means. I say it's income proof because it doesn't matter if you're making $30,000 a year or $300,000 a year or $3 million a year. If you live above your means, you're going to go bankrupt at times, or at the very least put yourself in a really bad position in the future. We all have seen the stories of professional athletes or actors or singers who they're bringing in $8-10 million a year for 5 or 6 straight years, and 2 years later they're broke. You wonder, how the heck does that happen? It's because even making $10 million a year, there's a way to live above your means. There are houses that are too expensive. There are yachts that you don't need. There are helicopters that you don't need to purchase. You can just charter for a day, right? And that's way outside the realm for most of us. But it's the same thing when you're making $40,000 a year. There are cars that you can't afford. Just because you want one, just because it's flashy, doesn't mean it's a good decision. Be modest. There's nothing wrong with driving a 2014 Ford Escape for a few years out of college. There's nothing wrong with living in an apartment or having a starter home, or not having 6 pairs of Ray-Bans, 1 pair to match every single outfit in your wardrobe. All of that is great if you can afford it, and all of that is hopefully something that if you want to work toward, you're able to. But again, the modesty when it comes to those items is going to really set you up for success or failure 20, 30, 40 years down the line when it comes time to think about retirement and when you can stop working and what your financial situation looks like there. I ask, what do you value? Because there are times when having a really nice car is important for whatever reason. Maybe it's just important to you, or having a big house, having a 5-bedroom house with a finished basement, or having those 6 pairs of Ray-Bans or the brand new pair of J's. If that's what's important to you, I encourage you to work toward it, and I encourage you to budget for it, but understand that pulling one lever is going to push another lever, and that closing or opening one door is going to likely close another door, where if you do have a really nice car, a brand new Mercedes, say, and you can afford it, maybe your house isn't as nice, or maybe you have to go suit shopping at a second tier store, something along those lines. But if you value those things and you plan for them accordingly, even if it's something as small as being able to afford the new gaming console as soon as it comes out, understand how that decision affects the rest of your financial decisions. Understand how the ability to be able to purchase a new PS4 affects your ability to be able to purchase a new pair of sunglasses. Those are all things you just need to take into context and think about the return on investment. What are you getting out of these purchases? And then the last thing with big purchases, when you go to buy a car, when you go to buy a house, things of that nature that are going to require some bigger loans, I promise you, you are going to be told you can afford a lot more house and a lot more car than you actually can. All those lenders are looking at is how much money you have coming in and how much of that can safely go toward that purchase. They're not looking at your other expenses. They're not looking at how many kids you have, or what your lifestyle looks like, or how many times a week you go out. Be aware of that as well. Run your own numbers, figure out what's smart for you. Just because they tell you you can afford a $300,000 house doesn't mean that that's the right decision. And if you go into that interaction thinking, I'm going to max out my cap, I'm going to max out my ability to purchase whatever it is they say I can afford, every other piece of your financial system when it comes to running your life is going to take a hit and it's going to suffer. So don't fall into that trap, and be smart about living within your means, staying modest when it's required, and knowing how your values are going to shape your financial flexibility. That's really the stuff that I wanted to cover. Like I said, Brian talked about most of it, and I think his information was probably a lot more exciting and hopefully a lot more beneficial than mine. A few things to continue on with your education. The Teak Nation podcast there, you can find it anywhere podcasts are available. Rob Guarini is our Grand Histor. We're actually going to bring him in next week for another topic, but he talked about personal finance. He is CFO for a Fortune 500 company, so he's got a lot of experience. That podcast is all about financial management. A lot of it's related to Teak. The personal part starts at 23 minutes there, but I'd encourage you to give it all a listen. That's going to be a good resource for you. TED.com, there's a whole page on TED Talks that cover personal finance, and they can be found right there. There's dozens of videos. I didn't just want to pick one. Find the ones that are right for you, that speak to you more directly. Watch them and take stock of what they mean to you. Find a financial mentor, someone you can bounce ideas off of, someone you can talk about when it comes to buying a house, buying a car, planning a wedding, having your first child. Finding someone who's more experienced and is able to speak to those things directly, whether that's a parent, a sibling, a fraternity brother, a coworker, a friend, that's going to be a lot more beneficial, I think, than trying to find articles and videos about how to do those things. Having that real life experience is invaluable. If you're affected by the COVID-19 layoffs, furloughs, go figure out what money you have coming in. You can go to the irs.gov page with that economic impact payment. Figure out what that looks like for you, and start budgeting now for how you're going to spend that money and make that last. Then a few other pieces, the compound interest calculator on NerdWallet, that's going to help you figure out investments. Talks about a down payment and then monthly contributions, at what interest rate, how long, and here's how much money you're going to have in the future. I think that's a really valuable tool when it comes to thinking about the long-term future, investing, retiring, things of that nature. Opening up those investment accounts like Brian talked about, and getting started now, even if it's just $20, $25 a month. Those are some of the different services. Do some research, figure out which one's right for you. And then lastly, our week 2 challenge of community service project. I talked about that in the last video, so please go check that out. If you haven't already, you can just watch the last 3 or 4 minutes where I talk about it. And then next week, we're going to get into chapters 5 and 6 of the Teak Guide. We're going to talk about the structure of Teak and your chapter with our venerable Grand Preakness, Dr. Jim Hickey. And we're going to talk about building your professional skill set and preparing for job interviews, building resumes, all of that it takes to land an internship or land a job. That's next week's 3.2 video. And again, we're going to bring in Rob Guarini for that as well. So thank you all for your time. Hopefully this was valuable. Hopefully you're able to take some of these nuggets and start making some changes to your financial habits. If you have any questions, please reach out. Please let me know. But until next time, appreciate it and take care.